We have an interesting topic to discuss today, and it's one that caused quite a bit of consternation for me. I ran into an interesting group of people on Mill Avenue who refer to themselves as the Hebrew Israelites. They're known to some as the Black Hebrew Israelites. And I actually did a podcast on it, not a podcast, a blog post on it, which we're stealing the title from, Racism in a Purple Tunic. Vocab, actually, our guest, as well, had an interesting interaction with them, too. But what was particularly upsetting about this is I see, and we discuss on the show, quite a few things that are upsetting to us about religious beliefs that are taken to extremes, and this is a perfect example of that. It's a group which is claiming sort of a quasi-Christian view of quasi-Christian religious belief, but one that is incredibly ethnocentric and militant. In my experience with them in downtown Tempe, what was so upsetting and unsettling about it was the fact that they were willing to relegate all people who didn't fit within what they viewed as the chosen ethnicities to a position of slavery in the afterlife, and then claim that this is something which is authorized and proclaimed by the Christian Bible. Which is actually the main reason we've brought Vocab Malone here. He had another unsettling interaction with them, but is here to offer a Christian perspective on a number of the things that they said. So this is going to be an excellent discussion. I'd like to thank Vocab first before switching off to you here for putting up with our intro. So I certainly appreciate that. But I'd love to hear a little bit about your interaction with them at the the Roosevelt Light Rail Station?
That was actually Camelback and 19th or 15th Avenue. So I was on the way to the Collector's Market when it used to be on 7th Avenue and Camelback to go get a couple Hulks for my son. On my way there, we see the guys out there with these sandwich boards, yelling at everybody going by. Those are Black Hebrew Israelites. I know those guys. Not those in particular, but their group. Let's just go get the toys. If they're here when we come back, okay, we'll do it. Well, like an hour later, they were still out there. So I went up to them and said, hey, just want to see what you guys were all about. I had my little iPod and my sweater, so I recorded some of it. That's how it went down.
About an hour and a half of it, too, and it was,
yeah.
I have to say, it was painful to listen to. I'm curious, did you ever get to the bottom of the sort of name confusion? Because I know it might have been a different video or your clip, at some point they'd said to refer to them as Black Hebrew Israelites as categorizing them, and they don't like being categorized. That might have been a different clip, but did they ever get down to the name confusion there?
No, I know that's how they're called, and like if you look up some of these groups, they'll call themselves Israelites. Others won't. This particular group didn't like it. I think they just want to be known as true Israelites. Just we're Israelites. Why they don't want to be thought of in sort of that kind of framework, I guess. But the ones from Columbus that I know, they're like their channel on YouTube is Columbus Israelites. So I don't know. They have different names. There's really interesting names. They have like Shield of, and they get really elaborate. There's what they call camps, but it's all under this general rubric of Black Hebrew Israelites. They just don't like that name, I guess.
Mm-hmm. But they all use the same like purple tunics and whatnot, but have differences in their sort of...
Well, I saw some on a Village Voice article that looked like they were from medieval times. If you guys have ever been there in L.A., that's the way these guys dress. And he actually carried around a sword and had chain armor and all that. So I think they all have sort of their different flavors. The ones in Columbus that I first saw, they did more like cut out their own cloth and material and sort of put it on top of their hip-hop clothes. And so it looked like guys who were like hip-hop dudes who volunteered to be in a church play, and they gave them these wardrobes, and they had, the only difference was they had real beards, not fake beards. I mean, so there's some variation, but an emphasis on beards and some sort of Bible-looking, Ten Commandments-looking garb.
So what they essentially expect some sort of ancient Israelite warrior to appear as is what they went with. Because I got a clip from a Jerry Springer special where they had these guys on, and
right.
I'm going to use the analogy I used earlier. It looked like they'd robbed Elvis on the set of a Western. It was really, really terrible.
I haven't seen that one, but I mean, how can you not want to see that, you know?
It seems like they got a lot of variety with the clothes they wear, the things they say, the things they claim. Do they even have an official text or an official, like theological doctrine or
not
like
that I know of, and even in their use of the Bible. So, for example, you said Christian Bible. I would say technically that's not true for a variety of reasons. Some only accept the Torah, so the first 5 books. That's some are limited that way. Some accept the Old Testament and the Apocrypha. Those are the books, generally speaking, that Roman Catholics and some of the Orthodox tradition have that sort of, quote, in the middle. Some accept Old and New Testaments and the Apocrypha as well. Some don't accept the New Testament, and some sort of have hierarchy if they accept all of them. So, given text, no, accept a certain interpretation of at least the Torah, most likely other sections. I've seen it, the Apocrypha actually is a pretty big role in some of their interpretation.
Because they say that the King James is the perfect inspired word of God. Somehow, the King James was what I keep hearing is their perfect source for their religious beliefs, but they keep pulling from the wisdom of Solomon and the various apocryphal texts after claiming the perfection of the King James, which just doesn't make any sense to me. Did you find any justification for any of that? Because I've not. It seems like it's sort of a hodgepodge of stringing together whatever they can find to justify their ethnocentrism.
Why they choose one source over another? No, I don't know. It's very confusing. Like, the main way you find out about these guys is personal interaction. If you see them on the street, and watching a lot of YouTube videos filled with yelling and swearing. That's the 2 main places you're going to learn about them.
It's hard to even watch. I was looking up, trying to do research before the show, and that's really all. That's all there is just the YouTube clips of arguments in the street, and it's hard to watch after a while.
My favorite classic is the Black Hebrew Israelites of Phoenix versus the 99%ers downtown Phoenix. Because that one, you have to understand the context. Think about the 99 folks. They're thinking, yo, check out these guys. They're coming down. They're kind of yelling. They're clearly angry. They're going to be with us, and if you watch the video, you could get the impression that's what they thought, and then they kind of started listening to what they were
Wait a sec, what's going on here?
And it's like, wait, hold on. Where's the coexist and everything else? It's kind of funny because they didn't expect it, and I feel like these guys relish that. Like, I feel like they like, it's almost like, this is subjective, but they like almost extra that President Obama is black, because I think they like the extra shock of being able to deface not just any president, but a black president, because the show, we're extra against the system. We don't even care if the dude's black. Like, that's the way I feel, because they would do that to any president, draw the horns and have all the stuff. But it feels like they're like, and people never expect it from us. I don't know. That's the sense I get. There's definitely some Howard Stern going on there.
That's. I didn't actually get to see a picture of President Obama with horns.
Yeah.
I did see the Jesus one with horns, and this is part of the reason I brought up the name is they seem to be having an identity crisis. Some of them are insistent on it being the Black Hebrew Israelites, and there's others who are a bit more liberal about what ethnicities aren't going to be enslaved. And they have there's a lot of confusion with definitions, which we'll get into. But they had a sign in Tempe with Jesus with horns. It was with bad Spanish. It was "This is the devil" and "Jesus es negro." El Diablo written all over it. And they're trying to draw in Hispanic persons too, but they're very specific as to what sort of Hispanic people they're looking for. I am not the right kind of Hispanic person because of Spanish heritage. And the word Hispanic itself, though, this is where we have to start getting into definitions. The word Hispanic literally means any person of Spanish heritage regardless of race. So Filipinos with Spanish heritage would be Hispanic. Black Cubans with Spanish heritage would be Hispanic. White Puerto Ricans would be Hispanic. And what they're essentially doing is they outline the 12 tribes of Israel as various nationalities.
They have little charts, and usually if they have sandwich boards or billboards, usually you've got to have a Jesus or a presidential figure with horns and some kind of like paraphernalia on the side.
A white Jesus.
Yeah,
blue eyes.
the very
paraphernalia.
Yeah, the very Anglo, Western European Jesus guy, and you've definitely got to have the chart that's like in the cereal box, the like secret code. Like it's like a decoder. It's like, this tribe is actually this modern day ethnicity. It's like the code of like, oh, that's what I am. So the idea is like sort of brown peoples of the world all have some lineage that they can ultimately trace back to the Jewish people who were dispersed in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. That's what they're saying. And I think the way they kind of like, my guess is if you like bought into the teaching and went with it, they would say it's with even reddish. His beard is reddish, and when I saw him, he has a slight like sort of Appalachian accent, and he's with all these dudes. I'm like, this is a strange sect. I've never seen this before. But the stuff he says is identical to the stuff the other guys say. My guess is that somehow great grandpa was part Cherokee, so he's all good or something like that. Because they soften up if you're like, oh, yeah, I'm part this and I'm part that, and I like what you're saying. They soften up.
Yeah, and I noticed that in the recording that you made with them, that they softened up a bit when they thought you might be Sicilian.
Well, I am Sicilian, but when they're like, oh, well, you might have some true Israelite in you because, you're part Sicilian, which I responded to, Mamma Mia.
Well, then, see, that's very different from what the group on Mill Avenue said. For them, persons who are of mixed ethnicity are not getting into heaven unless they're going as slaves. So they were even worse. And
I met some liberals. What do you know?
Yeah, you met some liberals in their group, but their establishment of the 12 tribes of Israel seems almost arbitrary, and they're picking multi-ethnic nationalities. Like we look at Ephraim is Puerto Ricans. Well, Puerto Ricans aren't all the same ethnicity.
Those Puerto Ricans.
Ethnicity to them and nationality are equivalent. It's very confusing. I know you responded with, oh, I'm an American, when they're berating you. Well, what's your nationality? They didn't seem to understand why you kept saying American.
Yeah.
They don't seem to understand much about the difference between ethnicity or identity, and they even confuse that when it comes to the Bible. They don't really understand what a Gentile really is or what a Jew really is.
Right, yeah, there's some definite... I mean, you're probably referring to when I said, hey, look, the Scripture talks about Gentiles and Greeks and, talking there's inequality before the foot of the cross is the way theologians often put it. And passages like Galatians 3:28 say this. They would say, oh, well, that is referring to Hellenized Jews. So, of course, that's a real cultural thing. Jews that were, quote, Hellenized. That means Jews that had sort of bought into the Greco-Roman, specifically Greek mindset, dress, way of doing things, all that kind of stuff. So what they're saying is, yes, when the Scripture is using it, in places where it would be problematic if they interpret it otherwise, they say that's referring to Jews who had adopted that mentality. That's what that means. And so I asked them, then how would, in Greek, in the New Testament, how would the writers refer to an actual ethnic Greek who's not an Israelite you're needing to pull out or something of the system? I never got an answer on that, so I don't know the answer. Because if you're going to say this word can't mean that, you've got to be able to say how the writer could say it. You see what I'm saying? Sort of a hermeneutical principle. But I don't know the answer. I don't know if they do either.
I doubt they do. They claim familiarity with Hebrew, but apparently didn't have it. And I'm going to do these two clips back to back just because we covered the nationality berating earlier, and then get into the because you grilled them on Hebrew, and they didn't respond very positively. They just started attacking you personally. But here's the nationality one.
You been what?
Adopted by God.
Okay, you been adopted by God, right? Well, what's your nationality?
Well, I guess I live in America. But ultimately, I'd say I'm a citizen of the kingdom of heaven.
Okay, you said. But what did God name your people in the beginning?
Adam.
Adam?
Yeah, it means man.
No, what did God name your people in the beginning?
Look at the demons,
Adam.
No, see that? Yeah, them demons coming out. Because guess what? He separated, he made groups of people and called them something. So for you to call yourself Adam, that means that you're calling yourself Christ. That's blasphemy. Because you can't talk to God personally.
You guys have a Bible.
Don't tell them shit. The scriptures say.
Let's go to the scripture.
Wait, hold on. The scriptures say, cast not thy pearls before swine.
Yeah, I got a Bible.
Wait. Cast not thy pearls before swine. You don't want to tell us your nationality. So according to, you're fucking abominable.
According to, you're effing abominable. I don't know. Well, I wanted to know what it was according to. Like, like who says because you don't tell someone your nationality equals abomination? But
maybe
anyway.
this is like a Gnostic element to them. You can't have that secret knowledge yet.
Yeah. I don't know. So that gives a little bit of a flavor of they're obsessed on who are you. And what I was saying go to Acts 17. What's going on there is Paul, it's one of the few times you see Paul interacting with like a culture that's not really Jewish as much. I mean, you see it sometimes, but he's at Athens and he speaks at the Areopagus, Mars Hill, and he gives a speech in there, and he says to these Stoic and Epicurean philosophers in Acts chapter 17, verse 26, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth. Now, the point is, if someone says in any way that Scripture is some kind of binding authority on them, and that's a bit of sort of narrative origins theology there, then how can you have God making these separate groups of people from jump sort of lesser or greater ontological value? That was my point, to say, look, this is saying everybody from one. Mm-hmm. And I don't know their exact answer because, I mean, they're trying to get at what did God call your people in the beginning. I don't know. I don't even actually know how a person would, quote, determine that by their standards. I don't know.
So they reinterpret what it means to be a Gentile, and then don't they quote something from Matthew? I forget what it is. Something which suggests that it was in one of those interviews that you did. Something that suggests that something about the descendants aren't everybody, or the chosen people aren't everybody, or something like that. Well,
I asked him, I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but I asked him on another occasion to go to Matthew chapter 28. And so what's happening in the narrative, it's at the end of the account of Matthew's gospel. Jesus is about to ascend. He gives what Christians call the Great Commission. Right. And there's sort of something in here that would be contrarian to their theology, where he says, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. Mm-hmm. And so that was my point there, to say Jesus is saying go to everybody. There's not some kind of segregation, you know what I'm saying, based upon the way they look or something. They said, their point was, yes, because you have to go to everywhere, because the Jews are the only people who have been scattered abroad to pull them out of the cultural context they're located in to get the true Israelites, not actually to get the everybody's, to get the true Israelites stuck in those ways. And they gave an example of a Jewish, Hebrew person living in a Chinese society. And they make really, to say the least, politically incorrect jokes. Like, he's like, so if I saw an Israelite and he's in China and he's wearing his kung fu shoes, I would say, come over here, brother. I'm not like, what? There's like a lot of those kind of jokes in the discussion. You know what I'm saying? So they were definitely equal sort of opportunity offenders.
Well, they also seem to think that all Asians are Chinese. In addition to that, so
they made the Slurpee 7-Eleven jokes. I mean, against Indians. I mean, they were just all about it, Yeah.
Wow.
But so that was their way to say that doesn't really mean people of every ethnic background, you know.
Just the tribes of Israel.
Yes.
Yeah, but in that same way, how would they respond to something if they do accept the authority of the New Testament, like Romans 11:13, where Paul says that he is the apostle to the Gentiles?
Right. My guess is the way they got away from when I brought them Galatians 3:28, which says, in Christ there's neither Greek nor Jew. My guess is they would say, yeah, Paul is going to Hellenized Jews. Mm-hmm. Those Hebrews who are culturally under Greco-Roman cultural ways. That'd be my guess, how they would do that. I had a friend, if you guys listen to the show we did on Black Hebrew Israelites on Backpack Radio, my friend wrote in a blog after, maybe he said it on the show, he said, it'd be really interesting to go with them line by line through Romans 9 through 11, that chunk of scripture in the middle of Paul's letter, exactly for the kind of reasons you said, because the big question is there, if God really keeps his promises, why aren't more Jews following the Messiah? That's the throbbing question in Romans 9 through 11, and so there's discussion of like those kinds of things in there.
And in the same kind of way, I mean, if they can try to make the argument that Paul's talking to these Hellenized Jews, but Paul makes it very clear that the majority of the people he talked to were former pagans who had come to the Christian faith.
My guess is, if I was a Black Hebrew Israelite,
sorry to make it so that you have to represent their views.
Right. I would say, yeah, because they said this in the debate we had. They said, oh, these Jews were living just like these filthy Greeks. They were going to the bathhouses. They were hanging out butt naked in the gymnasiums. They were, molesting little boys. They had a stereotype of like first century Greek culture that was like, I mean, there's some truth to, anyways, that was the kind of stuff they were saying. So like my guess is they would say yes because they had been so inundated. And I think they see themselves as continuing this mission of pulling true Israelites out, who are mainly that we would see as Black Americans, out of the culture they're sort of subsumed under, telling them their true identity, and then telling them their true future, and then telling, let's get on this mission to go help other people, because your true future is to reign over all non-Israelite ethnicities. And I don't think it's like heaven the way people might think of heaven. I think some of them like say things like, this is the white man's heaven, ours is next, kind of thing. Because there's another video I heard where they do this chant the whole time, and it says, who got next? We got next. Who got next? We got next. Yeah. And I think that's what they're saying, referring to that kind of thing.
I think I heard one of them say on a YouTube video that to some white dude that he said, we're going to throw your kind in a big ass blender in the final days.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like they're going to reign and,
Yeah, boot upon the neck is like a famous thing for them to say. They love that phrase, boot upon the neck. That's one of their, and another one, anything they can slide in with chains. They love to say something about, you'll be wearing chains. Like even when I was speaking to them, they like totally, it's almost like, a child, like, look at the smile, shiny object over here, and they get distracted. They're kind of like that. Like if they saw an offensive person walk by and they're like standard, like a Black dude with a white girl, whoa, they're dropping me like a hot potato to yell at whoever's walking by for a second, because that's messed up to them. Yeah. If they see a dude wearing pants that are a little too tight in their view, they're not they're not talking to me anymore. They're talking to that dude. Wow. You know what I'm saying? So they see like a very sort of white dude walking by. Look at that guy walking like a So they would say that to passersby, like, hey, you ready to wear them chains? You ready for war? That kind of stuff. I'm like, hey guys, I'm still right here. Like there's 10 of you. Can't like 2 of you have like, hey, your job is to yell offensive things at anyone who's clearly not one of us. Your job is to talk to anyone who's interested in a more long-term conversation. Your job is to yell the Bible passages. Your job is to say, Right. But, like, it's not very, like, efficient. Like,
do they ever get disturbing the peace or, citations or kicked out of spots or anything?
I read that cops this is from the Village Voice article, which is it's a funny article. That cops don't like to arrest them because they'll be filling out paperwork for days. There's too much hassle. So if they don't have amplification, they tend to leave them alone. If there's more than 50 people gathered there, they generally tend to go over. If they're blocking, but they kind of like to be hands off, except I guess this is the good time to tell this. The way I found out about these guys is I got a cop friend in Columbus. He calls me one day and says, hey, John Mark, you're like the closest person I know to an expert on cults. So I've got these guys called the Black Hebrew Israelites, and they bust into Black churches during the middle of Sunday service and start yelling and cursing and saying all this crazy stuff. I'm like, oh, it's probably like Nation of Islam. Like, you ever seen the Malcolm X movie where they were kind of outside, like hitting up the people? No, he's like, no, it's not that. Here's how they dress. Here's what they do, and we've had to arrest them, and I have no idea. We don't really know what they are, what they're doing, and so can you help me? So I started researching them. That's actually the first. So some of them have this mission of going into church services in the middle and saying, hey, everybody, I mean, just think about the appeal. You're in there like, come join us. And like somebody looks and it's like all these young dudes are like, like dressed in purple tunics and, beard, I mean, I'm just saying like, looking. Who's like, you know what? I think that's where I'm leaving this and going with that. That is where it's at. Of course, that's not how it goes. People call the cops, and then my friend's like, what are these dudes doing? I have no idea. They just come in and yell.
So they just they build their movement from within the inside. It's their own kids and their generations that It's not people coming in from the outside.
So, okay.
Right? So horizontally instead of vertically kind of
That's a good question because I've wondered about how they grow. Now there's this Southern Poverty Law Center article which says that they're sort of on the rise, but racist Black Hebrew Israelites becoming more militant. But I don't know because what I've heard is most of the dudes in this have some kind of religious background, generally speaking. Like some of the guys I know are like sort of moderate Roman Catholic, moderate Jehovah's Witness, some moderate kind of Protestant tradition. Like there's generally speaking that kind of there, but it's not for them. And they see this, and I think the confidence and the bravado and sort of the certainty and sort of the reverse of the pendulum, like you've been pushed down and oppressed this way. The truth is this. They're trying to hold you down to make you think this about yourself. The truth is actually this, which is like this, literally the stark opposite. And they see these guys, and the thing is, we can laugh at these guys, and there's, I laughed at them some when I was with them, but I'm also, on the other hand, impressed with how much these guys have memorized, their ability to fire it off so rapidly, and sort of a basic like oratorical flourish, like not with just what they say, but sort of how they say. Like I actually have respect in certain ways for their what you might call their skill set. Now, generally, I'm talking about the leader, which is one or two. The guys around, it's like the classic like giant bully scenario with a tiny little guy on his shoulder who's like, yeah, right. It's totally like that. Like I don't mean size, because generally speaking, the BHI guys are pretty big dudes. Right. However that works out. There's like one dude who's clearly like Mr. Mouth, and he's like bam, bam, bam. But the other is like, tell him, like, kind of.
There's one dude yelling, and then another dude reading scriptures for him on command.
Yeah, there's a funny one. Sometimes the guys they have read scripture are not very good readers yet, and it's like, guys, you can't sound very confident if like the guy's like stumbling. Let's get a new guy. You need to train. But
put that guy on hat duty.
Yeah, put that guy.
Well, it could be. Perhaps they're preparing the fellow for an eventual teacher position, because it seems a part of it, and yes, we do laugh at them, and I find all of this, a good portion of this to be hysterical, but when I was actually interacting with them, it was a very frightening experience for me. Not like I felt that I was in any sort of like danger at that moment, even though they are very intimidating guys. The idea that they can harbor such intense hatred for people who they don't even know, and believe that it would be just for me to be enslaved and eternally punished based solely on my ethnicity is deeply disturbing to me. It's deeply disturbing, but I think that's part of it. I think part of what maintains it is that militancy. The leaders are the only ones who talk, and what I was trying to do when I was having a chat with them, and I don't know if you attempted this at all yourself, but I tried to get somebody on the periphery, one of the 30 people there in the purple tunics who's not the teacher, to say something. Like, do you all honestly accept this? Do you all really believe this? Nobody said a thing. And I think that demonstrates to them, even though that might not be the case, demonstrates to them that there's no dissent. There may be dissent, but they would never know it because it's so rigidly ordered. Right.
Well, I mean, I haven't met yet 65-year-old Black Hebrew Israelites. I'm not saying they don't exist, but like there's sort of a certain demographic, age-wise and other things, and what is the future of something like this? How does it work? So the Village Voice article speaks to a lot of these guys' ex-girlfriends, and if anecdotal evidence is anything, they're based on the Village Voice, the New York kind of guys at least. They don't really take care of their girls, wives, or children. If the Village Voice article was in any indication, I don't know if that's true necessarily. I mean, but some of the guys I've heard some advocate polygamy and things like that. Some haven't. I've heard others that say, "Look, it's one, and you stay with that person." So, because I don't know if you guys caught it. I don't know how much there's like. Yeah, we could talk about the ethnic like superiority complex. If you talk about misogyny, it's way deep in Black Hebrew Israelites. Like everything, like I mean, I don't know if you heard. There's a part where they make a joke about my mom.
What? Not into that.
Yeah, and then they here's what they say, because it's a long story how it got to this point. But basically, they asked me if my mom had sperm in her body. which I didn't answer, and the guy says, she does when a man sticks a rod in her. Like, so they're very, I don't know, should I be saying, well, they're very like, everything's sort of euphemistic, or, like the woman is clearly an object. For example, the Columbus sect that I told you guys about, there's a video of them. They're at Schiller Park, this place I used to always kick it as a kid. And every time a jogger goes by, they give them little nuggets of wisdom, as they call, because people are running around the track. So they're like, every time you go by. And so the guy's line for the day is, what O.J. Simpson did to Nicole was right. That was his whole spiel, because he was saying she cheated on him. That's his property. He should have the right to kill her. That was his main line. And he would say things like, and that's going to happen to all white women in the future anyway.
Wow.
Like, so it got, kind of veered over there. But I mean, that's how it is. I listened to a broadcast the other day where one of the leaders of one of the camps, they don't all say stuff like this, but they sometimes have the names like General such and such. So the one guy was General so-and-so, and these guys were saying, hey, General so-and-so says that as long as a female menstruates, then it's okay to rape her, which I don't actually understand the logic.
What?
But
which is the opposite of what's in the Old Testament.
Yeah, I don't fully understand. Maybe it had to do with if she's on her menstrual cycle. Their interpretations are a little bit weird, but hey, General so-and-so said it.
Well, I mean, it's precisely the... See, I thought the way Exodus treated women was awful. That's... The Old Testament verse he's referring to labels women as unclean when they're menstruating, and that they can't approach the altar of God. Men shouldn't be making contact with them at all, and that's for up to 7 days after they've concluded their menstrual cycle.
Maybe they mean if she's past puberty. Maybe that's what they mean.
Puberty.
But it's a little confusing. I still don't actually understand the logic. It's still insane.
Why? It's okay to rape a female anytime while she's able to have a period.
So General Zod really obfuscated this point. Like, it's really hard to get into this.
Because of General Zod. General Zod is, do you want to tell him?
General Zod is like the leader of the rebellion on Krypton, and kneel before Zod. You've all heard that.
Rhymes with God, what? Sorry. Okay. No, but this podcast, there's a weird podcast that are guys who all came out of BHI, and now they say they're all Christian, but it's really weird because, so they're against the old BHI stuff, and they were talking about some of the stuff on their podcast, but it's weird, their Christianity is all couched in still BHI terms. Mm-hmm. So they don't refer to themselves as Christians, they still refer to themselves as Israelites, but they refer to themselves as ex-Black Hebrew Israelites. So, I mean, I don't know how many of those guys exist on the planet, but it's a podcast of these three guys who just talk about it the whole time. So, the thing is, it's funny. Here's what I totally foresee people listening to this being like, why are they doing this show? Let's, like, talk about, the latest thing Pat Robertson said or something. Then what'll happen is they'll drive by and see these guys and be like, what? Dude, and then they'll know that I'm truly a prophet myself. So I'm just kidding about that.
And they'll still be wearing the hat.
Yeah.
Well, and it's important for us to discuss things like this. I'm glad you brought that up. Like, why are we doing this show? I view any militant organization like this as dangerous, and the fact that they could be perceived as representing all of Christianity is something that disturbs me as well.
Well, they want to be considered true Israelites, and there's even a movement among them to move back to Israel. Mm-hmm. And I guess some of them had some success in doing that, but a bunch of them have also been kicked out because they do things like overstay their visas, all these kind of things. But there's a small community that live in Israel that are like Black Hebrew Israelites, I think, that go back to the 60s.
Right. So this dude that started it was a steel worker from Chicago, Ben Carter, and he had a vision of the Archangel Gabriel, who told him to take his people, the African Americans, back to the Holy Land of Israel, and apparently he took a group of something like 450 or something of his buddies back to Israel, and they, like you said, stayed with a visa of some kind of work visa, or they were granted tourist status, and then they got resident status in '91, and then permanent residency in 2003, and then I guess they were granted Israeli citizenship in 2009. Yeah,
so I mean, there's some of these dudes, and it goes around. I mean, when I if you know anything about the Nation of Islam, there's some similarities with them, but definitely not an identical thing. I mean, it's almost like if the Nation of Islam wanted to think that they were practicing Judaism, here's what it would look like, or something like that. And then I'm not saying that's what they would say about themselves, but I'm trying to help people to understand it. But then you have to kind of know what the Nation of Islam is. Because I even heard one girl say, why do they wear those silly clothes? Like, a bow tie looks so much better, because that's what the Nation of Islam, when they're in dress, uniform, they wear bow ties. But then some of the theological ideas are sort of a pop level and sort of a more crass or crude version of something that actually has sort of an academic current in it called Black liberation theology. Some people have heard about liberation theology because of Jeremiah Wright. That's the first time it sort of got on the pop scene. But liberation theology is sort of with the development of the so-called third world, sort of the indigenous theologians from those countries said, here's the way we can interpret our Roman Catholicism or our Christianity according to sort of the way you would have a meta-narrative that has its eyes on the oppressed, and it's called liberation theology. And there's a Black liberation theology as well. So
I can leave a link to some of Gustavo Gutierrez's work on that too.
Yeah, Cone's kind of the well-known Black liberation theology. In the modern day, I mean, there's guys who have these kinds of ideas like Cornel West, or they have some of those undercurrents in there. I mean, Jeremiah Wright does as well. I mean, if you listen to what he says, I mean, he's sort of in that train of thought, which is rare for a United Church of Christ minister, by the way. It's kind of an odd thing going on there in Chicago.
To bring up Cornel West, I mean, he's even mild for what I would think of as being the sort of extreme of this Black liberation theology. When we look at people like Louis Farrakhan, for example, who's trying to return he believes that he is carrying the true Nation of Islam forward in its original sort of roots with Elijah Muhammad, the incredibly racist origins of it, whereas Elijah Muhammad's son is attempting to reform it into something that looks more Sunni and try to make it less like spaceship oriented.
It's more Orthodox Islam, and that's probably what Malcolm X was doing towards the end of his life as well. And so, like with Farrakhan, even now, nobody knows what's going to happen when he dies, because it's really unclear sort of what the NOI is. And if you think about it, it's kind of a big deal, because if you remember the Million Man March, I mean, that was a pretty big deal. But nobody knows now. I don't know if you guys know, but Farrakhan has a house in South Phoenix.
Does he really?
Yeah, it's a classic house. I mean, you can you can find the address online pretty easy. Wow. But it is a house in South Phoenix. But nobody knows what'll be next with that. But I don't think like a guy like Cone, he's dead, but would be like, yeah, Farrakhan's preaching what I was writing in my academic books years ago. I mean, it's twisted with all kinds of other things going on in there. So we don't want to necessarily lump them all together. But it's interesting. I mean, it's kind of like the pendulum swings. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I mean, I see some of that. Like, folks have some legitimate gripes. They see this message, they latch onto it, they feel empowered.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's then, I guess this is, we'll have everyone's opinion jump in here. It could be, since it was in 1966 that it came up, a sort of a later link in this chain of liberation ideologies that came about, because we see a lot of this rejection of the black nationalism movements that came up, and this rejection, the jumping to Islam was the rejection of the bonds that were Christianity imposed by the slave masters, and it seems like it could very well be a part of that trend.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, and I mean it's really even more extreme because Nation of Islam, even though it's aberrant, has like some, barely connection to some kind of other Orthodox thing. Black Hebrew Israelite beliefs are less connected to whatever they're supposed to be connected to, like if it's Judaism, which I think that's the closest place they would align themselves with, because they talk about Sabbath, they talk about law keeping. It's sort of very true, like they would say Old Testament. That's why they were always on me about where's my beard at. Like if you listen to the thing, they kept on asking me where's my beard, because I'm supposed to have a beard.
I left it in my sock drawer.
Well, the sad thing is, if I didn't work, I would totally have a beard. But I work, so I can't have a beard.
Oh, that's too bad.
No, that must be the white man oppressing you.
I don't know, but yeah. But it's a true thing. I would have a beard if I didn't work. They see me with a beard, either I'm on vacation or I've been fired.
So I'm not sure if I actually want to see you with a beard then.
So if you see Vocab on the street and he has a beard, help him out.
Help him, throw him a few bucks.
This is a true story. When I first started Bible college, I fell on for pretty hard times, and I don't know if everyone can say this, I have had homeless people buy me food. One Native American man, I'll never forget, bought me Jack in the Box tacos, and that was my only meal that day, and I swear they're the best tacos I ever had.
Wow.
Ever.
Wow. It's pretty cool. Cool story.
Why are we laughing at
it's the context. It's the context. It's funny now,
My brother-in-law he did a 2-year mission in England, and he comes. He had someone whose house he was invited to, one of the English Mormons, said, "We'll make you dinner. What do you want?" The first thing that comes to mind is tacos. I'm like, okay, we'll make tacos. So they get the Jose Ole taco shells and fill it with like boiled beef and ketchup.
Yeah.
Those are the tacos. So he gets to Detroit, and he has when he comes back and has a Taco Bell taco. And like, this is the best food I've eaten in 2 years because English food is basically salt. Yeah.
This is like
well, we digress.
Yes.
And digest.
What?
That's funny. Well, getting back to the historical tidbit here. There's some blatant misunderstandings of history. They believe that Corinth is an Israelite city. That came up. Rome had a black emperor.
Was that a real claim? Did they say that?
That was a claim in the recording I was listening to.
Really?
Yeah.
I missed that one. Though, think of Corinth. I think what they were saying is that the church at Corinth mainly had it mainly just had Israelites in it. I think that's what he was saying.
Well, I think my favorite statement,
which is it's kind of weird, right?
my
Especially if you consider the letter to Corinth, it's all about like eating food sacrificed to idols and all this stuff.
Yeah, it's all about whether or not they should keep the Old Testament.
Well, no, I don't know.
Yeah, my favorite statement though was that the Corinthians couldn't have had access to Paul's letter because they didn't have a printing press.
That was a weird
press hadn't been invented.
He said it to me like he was teaching me.
You have the letter in your possession. Obviously, it was reproduced.
There's some strange. There's like when dude says that the New Testament was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't if anyone knows what the Dead Sea Scrolls are. It's copies of from Hebrew from the first century is when they found them, all of the Old Testament and commentaries on the Old Testament. So there's what they call sectarian books from these probably, no one knows for sure, maybe Essenes who lived in the basically caves in Qumran by the Dead Sea. My point is to say all that there was no New Testament documents found in there. And they actually said the Gospel of Thomas, so that's around 150 or so. But you've got, anyways, just craziness through and through with some mistakes.
So they do pull in Gnostic texts as well.
I don't know why he mentioned Thomas. I had never heard it in the discussion. I don't know the reason. Maybe because of the misogyny, they like that last line. Hey, tell Mary to leave because she's a woman and not worthy. And then Jesus says to Peter, "Don't worry, I'll make her into a man so she could be worthy like you." Saying 114 of the Gospel of Thomas, the 114th, what they call Logia, says that. Which is always weird. Why?
So of course they would have to exclude the gospel according to Mary Magdalene and Philip.
Maybe I don't know. It's just some strange.
I think our confusion comes from assuming that they have to be internally consistent, and that they're not just grabbing at things desperately trying to get a hold of something. Yeah,
and that's this. Oh my gosh! I think for me, as much as the history stuff bothers me, the science stuff, the inconsistency with science drives me even crazier.
Did they
said that there was no melanin. There's no such thing as melanin.
Yeah.
That was made up. I tried to explain that I could demonstrate a common origin for all human beings. That's easy to do, genetically speaking.
That's funny that
genetics isn't real. That's white science. That's designed to confuse people. It's like the trichology of Islam. Yeah.
So this is funny because obviously we come from different worldviews. I'm turning to Acts 17 to say, look, everybody comes from one man. You're obviously go into a different resource, but it's funny because we're saying the same thing and the response is the same. You brought up melanin too?
Oh no, you brought up melanin.
Okay.
You brought up melanin.
But it's funny though, the trichology. So Elijah Muhammad, who taught X and Farrakhan, who was sort of followed after the actually founder of Nation of Islam, is a guy named Farrard Wallace. I just forgot his name. it's like Wallace D. Fard or something. And the funny thing is about him is he's not black. He's like Turkish and Caucasian, but he's the founder of the sect. But I think it's WAALLAC. But anyways, the point is, so Elijah Muhammad invented a phrase which is freaking awesome called trichology, like the white man's invention of sort of this, scientific fancy pants stuff that's designed to, trick us into things. So it's trichology. And Elijah Muhammad's books are like chock full of, like he says the way Moses got through certain mountains when they were going through the wilderness is with dynamite.
What? Wow.
Which would seem to me to be part of trichology, if you're asking me. But it's a real line in, I think it's Message to a Black Man. I think that's the book that it's in. But like, there's statements like that. It seems a little anachronistic. I don't know. Could be.
It's the holy hand grenade. He was using the holy hand grenade.
The holy hand grenade. And what's the rabbit?
The Book of Armaments, chapter 3.
So I understand that these black Hebrew Israelites basically think that there is this huge conspiracy against white man to suppress or oppress the black man, and their ideas are to just basically make their own nation and have be completely independent from any white influences at all. Is that correct?
Well, they want white people around. They need servants. And so in the new era or whatever, Caucasians, non-Israelites who are not chosen, because I had a line where I said something about, you're racist, whatever. They said, well, God is racist. That's what they said. So they would want us around, I think, as slaves, kind of like, you think about the Egyptian pharaohs, maybe, with their, maybe that's the idea. I don't fully understand their vision of the afterlife because they don't seem to believe in like a literal heaven and hell. That's not part of their eschatology based on what I've studied. So
Jewish.
Their point is, white people are trying to make you forget you are truly an Israelite. And there's a big trick going on where mainstream Jews, you think they're really Jews, they're not. And it's not Africans in Africa. It's the Jews, the Israelites who went through Africa who were dispersed. Now we came out on the other side. Let me show you this chart that tells you if you're could be part of the party. And let's do this thing together.
Right.
I don't actually know how this will be achieved. I think what I've heard him say is God's black son, Jesus the Messiah, will come back and he'll be the one to put the boot to all white devils' necks. I think it has to do with the return of who they always say, the Messiah, Jesus, the black Messiah, God's son. I think he's going to inaugurate it. I think that's what they think.
So to clarify, I guess they honestly believe that through the random kidnapping of people in Senegal, we somehow managed to kidnap specifically Israelites who made it through Africa and move them to North America, Senegal, other various places. But through random kidnapping, we got all the Israelites.
I wonder how that works. Because here's the thing: aren't you sort of interested in their sort of train? I'm interested in how they get their genealogical train. I'm I want to know how do you know Puerto Ricans are actually? Yeah. I want to see. I don't actually understand how they arrived there. I know they have the chart, but I just want to know I'm not even saying prove it. I just want to know how you did it because I don't actually understand.
So they don't think it's all of them, like all Cubans or all people from Argentina.
I don't know.
It's just the one. So what I heard online is they quote like Deuteronomy 28 and Exodus 13:3, which refers to Egypt as the house of bondage. But what they say is the real there's a second house of bondage, which is the United States. And the Israelites who are in bondage, it really is a prophecy that refers to the Africans or the slaves that were taken over in slave ships to America, and that's God bringing them in bondage, and then Deuteronomy 28:68, and the Lord will bring you back in ships to Egypt, which is a prophecy for America, a journey that I promised that you should never make again. And there you shall offer yourselves for sale, and your enemies as male and female slaves, and there will be no buyer. And then they have this other kind of conspiracy idea that the pyramid that is on the back of the dollar bill is a representation of Egypt, because when you think of Egypt, you think of pyramids, and that is a representation of America being the second Egypt, and the taking the Israelites being taken as bondsmen and bondswomen as slaves.
To me, that's highly interesting, because I enjoy when sort of any kind of conspiracy theory or whatever you want to call it has a certain has any aspect of interconnected logic within its own sort of frame. Like, so I want to say, let me follow along. So to me, that's highly interesting. I don't know if anyone else.
I'm waiting for the part where they mentioned the Illuminati.
I'm imagining Russell Crowe in front of a corkboard with like strands of string connecting various random pictures from magazines.
Well, that's interesting.
I guess the real black Israelites, which are the 12 lost tribes of Israel who live in in Cuba and Haiti and the Native Americans and Incas, they were, I guess, they're somehow the slaves that were in bondage in Egypt, and somehow they connect that together.
So they're slightly Mormon?
It's funny, like all the weird genealogical theories, they've kind of got under one roof. So if you think it's weird that Joseph Smith and all those guys claimed that modern day Native Americans had traces of the lost tribes of Israel within their blood or whatever, and they ended up here. Well, it's been changed now where it says some of them. It's really because it's in the preface. It's really edited out, like how much they emphasize that claim because they've done the DNA
because
test.
Try to minimize it as much as possible.
Yeah. So they basically say, hey, they're all wiped out, basically, so there wouldn't be traces left. I think that's what you would hear now. But so they've got that because they've got Native Americans, and I don't know if you ever saw some of the charts. They have like Native. I forget what it says exactly, but it will say like American Indian or Native American, and then they have one just for Seminoles. On one I saw, I was like, why do they get their own like tribe of Israel? Like out of all the Native American tribes, why do the Seminoles get their own? I mean, that's cool, I guess. So like, I felt like there's only 12 tribes to go around, okay? And if you're gonna like spread them out, why does like it just seemed a little like disproportionate, I guess.
Yeah.
But so they have this chart, but what they're saying is it's 70 A.D. because 70 A.D. is when Rome came in and destroyed Jerusalem. They destroyed the temple. That was the big thing that happened. And this has to do with actually relationships between Jews and Christians in the 70s because the temple was no longer there. This contributes to the rise of the synagogue and all kinds of other things within Judaism. But they're saying that's when we dispersed, went all over, and that's when we ended up in all these different places. Then they would say part of the places we ended up are part of the places that slaves ended up then being kidnapped and brought to America. So I don't think everyone was like a slave or anything. I think they're more focused on 70 A.D. is like this dispersal time for Jews. That's what I heard.
Even that there's some aspects of that aren't entirely clear too. I don't know if this is common, but one of the teachers, quote unquote, who I was speaking with on Mill Avenue, told me that the tribe of Benjamin was, and this is more of a I think it's confusing terms because when I'm reading it online, most of them are saying it's West Indies blacks, not people from India. And I was told that it was people from Western India. And I thought, well, perhaps they're referring to Dravidian people. But that was just this specific person, and the other guy sort of like giving him a weird look, but couldn't say anything because he's not the teacher at the time. Mm-hmm. So they need to take a basic course in geography.
No, facts don't matter. Facts don't matter to them.
Well, here's what's so interesting is because of what the Assyrians did to the northern kingdom of Israel way before Jesus was on the scene. Most Jews didn't even not everyone even knew their lineage, I think, and that's why they're sometimes called the 12 lost tribes of Israel. Like the northern kingdom, my understanding was kind of just so like if they've got all 12, who kept track of this and how do they know? I don't know. Well, and it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if you guys know Paul's letter to Timothy. He says that some people devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies which promote speculations. Like it seems like you guys, your whole MO is contra. I mean, there's other verses, but like this is you. Like, why are you doing it?
Well, it's a trichology.
It's a trichology.
They do have examples that they like to use as proof that they are Israelites, and of course they're jumping right back to the Africans in Africa that they claim are not Israelites as the example.
They're sort of anti-African.
They use the Lemba for the Lemba tribe in South Africa. The Lemba are actually Israelites. They're believed to be one of the lost tribes, but when they do genetic testing, they carry the Kohen haplotype, which appears at a rate of like 1 in 12 amongst persons who are Jewish, at the same rate in their population, and they maintain a lot of Jewish rituals.
I think that's true with some folks in Ethiopia as well.
As well. In India, of all places, there's actually a Jewish population there, which has recently been allowed to return to Israel. But they conveniently ignore that. They are only interested in the evidence from Africa of Jews appearing in Africa, not interested in evidence of Jews appearing in India.
See, dude, I'm like mad confused right now, but
it's very confusing.
I don't think any of us would want our friends or people we love or care about hanging out with this group of guys. I don't think, you know what I'm saying, like, what to do. Like, it seems like if you saw a dude chilling out in a coffee shop and you knew he was BHI, you might have a chance of talking to this guy. But how would you recognize him, and I say this half in jest, without his purple tunic on? You know, how would you know unless he's yelling in the coffee shop as he reads, right? I don't know. How would that go down? Like, because I think all of us would say, better not. We don't want people in BHI, right? But how do we do it? Because you had a conversation with him. I had a conversation with him. I don't know.
I thought that was a good start. And I don't know if I'm, I suppose, misplacing my hope here that maybe somebody will speak out. But I think they should be confronted. But the problem is the militancy. It's so regimented that it's difficult to get anybody to step out of line. So that might be something to brainstorm over. It's if you can't get someone to admit that they are dissenting, that they don't agree with the teacher, or that they feel deep down that there might be something wrong with it. If they can't talk, how do you get them to show everyone else that maybe they're not as unified as they might appear to be?
It's got to be in the right situation. When they're on the street and they're yelling and they're riling each other up, that's probably the wrong time to try to reason with them and present evidence and talk to them. But I mean, I don't know. It's like, there's other religious groups and different faiths that it's hard to reason with them. So maybe, there isn't a lot of resources online. So I think it would be good to, someone eventually will do a study on this and they'll, dedicate a major study to their claims.
Andre's second book.
There you go, Andre.
That's on Jerry Falwell, actually. So this will have to be number 3.
You're doing a Jerry Falwell?
I am.
So I did have a question about how they cherry pick verses out of the Bible to support their claims that Jesus was black and that the ancient Israelites, Abraham and Noah and those descendants were black, and they'll quote Lamentations 5:10 says our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. Other mentioned Job 30:30 mentions black skin.
Stuff in Revelation, stuff in Song of Solomon.
Revelations 1 is it claims to, and that's the one that they point to most often. What do you think about that?
Well, all those passages, if you go to them, like, you see you're using metaphors or symbolic language to describe the state. I think it's like some of these are, for example, are talking about, hey, we're blue. The thing is, I don't know every passage they turn to, but I know the one like in Revelation, it sort of portrays Jesus in very grandiose terms. Like it's not what, like, I had to go to the passage. I forget the passage.
It says that it describes hair that's like wool and white as snow.
Right.
So they'll say, look, his hair, who has hair like wool? Black people.
Right.
So they'll say this is a description in Revelation of Jesus who has hair like wool and is white as snow, and his eyes were a flame of fire. And they'll say, who has eyes flame of fire?
Well, that's the thing. Who does have eyes flame of fire?
Albinos.
Well, I'd say it seems like no one has eyes that are flame of fire. It seems like this is picturing Jesus like this is grand cosmic language. It's poetic language to describe the conquering Jesus in Revelation. Meaning it's not. These aren't literal description of who Jesus is, because you go there and you have these other, like I think a sword comes out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Well,
there's all kinds of stuff in Revelation.
So Revelation is like in the genre of apocalyptic literature. Like the whole New Testament's not apocalyptic; it has some apocalyptic elements, but it is an apocalyptic book.
Sure.
And so it does have that kind of language, but like. Is that a description of Jesus' physical features on the earth?
Well, they seem to think so. The image I'm actually using for this show is an example of that. It's a cartoon version of it, but he kind of resembles the boss that you meet at the end of the StarCraft for Super Nintendo. It's a ridiculous image that they and I think if you try to reconstruct much of what's in Revelation in reality, you're going to end up with something ridiculous. And they do a lot of this, and I'm actually surprised that they pulled from Song of Solomon of all places. I mean, most pastors tend to avoid Song of Solomon for obvious reasons. It's like pretty much a love letter. Yeah.
Well, I don't think these guys are pastors or worry about that.
I don't think they'd qualify as that either.
But I know, I mean, Song of Solomon, I mean, you preach on that, and you're preaching on sex between a husband and a wife. I mean, that's in essence what you're preaching on. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, but we're not scared to preach on Song of Solomon. One day we'll get there. But like, I mean, they pull anything. The point is this non-scripture related thesis, though. That's a driving interpretive mechanism, regardless, which is, here's my meta-narrative, here's my thesis, here's my theory, whatever, which is, here's this group of people that are the lost tribes of Israel, or whatever term you want to use. They need to be pulled out. The Bible supports it. But the funny thing is, even if it was true, like if Jesus was whatever color you wanted him to be, Moses was whatever color. I mean, certainly they're all probably darker and different looking than they're commonly portrayed in art. I think almost everyone would say, yeah, we all know that. Okay. Mm-hmm. But if you gave all that, does that prove anything about their theology, their version of history, their understanding of the future, or anything else for that matter? As a Christian, I would say, does it make their soteriology true? You know, how one is brought right with God, or how one is saved. That's what soteriology is. Like, does it make it accurate? It doesn't logically necessarily follow.
In the end, they're still Jewish. In the end, they're still Jewish. So
you mean the Black Hebrew Israelites?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I mean, they're still I guess I don't even know. Some of them use the New Testament. So,
but see, what would that mean? Even if you were, because I mean, I would say even in the Old Testament.
Right.
Jews had to repent. They had to. There was, the Day of Atonement. There's all these things. In the New Testament, clearly repentance. And the Black Hebrew Israelites have some weird understanding of repentance that I don't fully understand what it is.
Weird understanding of which covenant we're supposedly under.
See, I find it interesting.
I don't know.
They are very apocalyptic in what you were kind of describing earlier. Yeah. They have this kind of classical apocalypse views where Jesus is going to come back and overthrow the evil powers on the earth and establish this kingdom of God, where it's going to be this kingdom of where black people will have their boots on the throat of everyone else.
Yes,
and it's weird because it doesn't even really parallel Revelations that much, if they even accept that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't think interpreting the Bible is their strong suit. But look, I mean, but in all seriousness, if you go to a lot of churches, like, are they really doing in-depth Bible study themselves there? Is the sermon modeling, like, strong hermeneutical principles? Is a sermon expository, meaning is the point of the sermon the point of whatever the passage is that you're reading? Now, we all know there's churches that do that, but I mean, what's happened on your average Sunday service, even your average Bible study? Generally, it's not that.
They try,
I would say, I don't know.
I think they're doing it right.
I wish I saw more trying. I would say you don't see a lot of trying. Like, the modern evangelical stereotype is a pastor who gives some kind of sort of self-help kind of cheerleader speech. Yeah, I mean, that's an extreme example. Then the Bible verses are almost like, see what I'm saying? Bible agrees. See what I'm saying?
Or they could be
on top. It's
Unitarian or Universalist or something, and have a love, kind of more acceptance, tolerance,
so
equality.
Compared to that, these guys seem like heavy duty. If you're coming out of a church setting where all that's going on is 20 minutes of yelling and personal stories about how you spend time with your children or something like that, these dudes seem like these are theological heavyweights. Check these guys out. These guys got scripture memorized. They know where to flip. I mean, look, it was impressive to me. When I asked them what language the Bible was written in, the New Testament, they said Latin, Greek and Hebrew. And I laughed and I said, just Greek, it's only Greek. And he said, no, John 19 and 20. And I didn't know what he was referring to the title list that the Roman crucifiers would put above the victim's head that said their crime. And on the title list, it does say in John 19, 20, in 3 languages, it said his crime. And so the fact he knew that right away, I was in my mind, I was like, what? These dude, how does someone just do that on this? But it's still not right actually, because it says the inscription's written in Latin, but it's written in Greek still. It's still in Greek. It's not like all of a sudden there's Latin interjected into the text, But I was just interesting, whoa, I'm just saying, so to me, if a dude could do that and your pastor's just up there every Sunday, telling jokes and all that, you're probably like, check these dudes out. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, they don't use a building. They don't go to church. They don't have a church.
They laugh at that concept.
Right.
You meet in a building.
They laughed at that to you, right, when you mentioned you were a pastor.
Yeah. Oh, because God doesn't live in a building. Why would you go to a building? I mean, Christians can meet wherever. But if you look, there's some videos online of them meeting in basements, and it's all elaborate with these weird tablecloths and lots of incense. In the Village Voice article I keep on referencing, somehow Homeboy got to go in one of their doohickey meetings and hang out with them in this setting. So they have meeting places. There's one I even read about that rents out a church. I was like, whoa. It's so I mean, they still have gatherings, but I mean, I guess the concept of maintaining your own building is funny.
But just to your point, they spend their time in public a lot of the times on street corners and whatnot, I'm guessing.
That's why they're not a cult, because they're not hidden, is what they told me.
But it seems like they kind of have a script, or they have they say the same things over and over and over again. So that's probably why they're able to just pull out certain facts, is because they have this repertoire of things that they say, things that they could throw back at the average Christian objecting to them.
Yeah, they do, but there's still a level of sort of improvisational ability that I'm just saying. I was like, damn, because your average Jehovah's Witness, when you get your average Jehovah's Witness and you start getting them cornered, it's difficult for them. And the ones who kind of know their way around pull out this book. They have a book it's called Reasoning from the Scriptures, that's answers to common objections by Christians. And if you really
it's like a Berlitz phrase book for Jehovah's Witnesses.
They'll turn to the passage and read it verbatim. These guys don't need to do that. The leaders, they're just I'm like, whoa, dude.
Yeah.
But the thing is, look, it's tough, guys. If you want to go up there and try to reason with them, it is difficult, because you're going to get probably shouted down, made fun of, mocked. You have to be a person with a thick skin who can handle this kind of thing, and you really want to reach out to them, and you really want to see them pull out of this. It's difficult, though. It's almost like you got to slide one of them your phone number secretly while the other guy's not looking and say, I know you're not crazy. Call me later so I can
you
help.
try to appeal to their humanity. It's just so difficult to do in that type of setting.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great place to go ahead and close our discussion on this. And before we finish up the show, I actually did want to ask Vocab one particular question, and Forrest is probably going to banter back and forth on this. I know you are huge into comic books and the Marvel universe.
Some.
Of all of the Marvel characters, which do you think would make the best god to base a religion off of?
The best god to base a religion off of? That's probably not... I would say the Watchers... If anyone knows who they are.
Are you familiar with what's going on right now?
No. See, so am I totally saying something messed up theologically then?
Well, right now the main Marvel storyline is the Watcher who watches Earth. He was killed. And the main kind of summer event is this murder mystery investigating it. So, touchy subject, dude. I mean, it's a little soon. The guy just died.
Okay, well, then I'm going to say, if somehow you could make Spider-Man God, he might be okay, because he has the dictum, with great power comes with great responsibility. Mm-hmm. And he's sort of a wise, crack kind of guy, and it'd be fun to have, that kind of in your text, kind of sarcastic jokes and stuff, with great power comes with great responsibility going on as well.
That's excellent.
Good answer.
All right.
Wait, did you have one? I just want to know yours real quick.
I didn't know this question was coming, but Spider-Man is my favorite, and I'd probably pick him too, because he's kind of torn and tragic, and I think he can reflect a lot, and I like that.
We found some wonderful common ground here.
Well, I mean, even Seitan Bergenkate in the Refining Reason debate said that his favorite superhero was Spider-Man. Matt Dillahunty said it was Jesus, but it was fictional characters, superhero.
Right, of course.
Well, that actually will conclude our show for today.